Good day, everybody. This is episode 8, I believe, of the XSharedCockpit usage tutorial series. So in this thing, I will show you how to make a basic XSharedCockpit.cfg file. And yeah, so first we'll explain the different types of headers. So we have the triggers header, which is used for bidirectional data transfer. So we want both the slave and the master to be able to control this. Right now, this functionality isn't implemented, but it will be soon. So be ready for that. Now, in XSharedCockpit, we don't have a transfer of control system. Instead, the master and the slave just switch places. So because to enhance simplicity of the plugin, since this is, of course, completely free effort. I'm not getting paid for this. Nobody's donating because I don't have a donate link. So it just for simplicity's sake, that's the control configuration. The master controls everything. He runs the flight model. The master provides like inputs to the aircraft's attitudes. So banks to the left and right, etc., etc. The throttle level and stuff. So now that we know that, right? So first, let's say we want both the slave and the master to be able to control the flaps, which seems reasonable, right? So first, let's engage CH mode, and now let's just move around the flaps a bit, right? And you'll see that one thing that is constantly changing is this flap ratio thing over here, right? So now we know that that's what controls the flap lever, right? Clearly, since every time we move it, the value of this will change. Let me just move it close to the flap lever so you can see clearly. Yeah, so let's say we want to sync that and we want both of them to be able to control it. So we'll go into our CFG file and we'll say under the triggers section header, we'll say, so we'll copy this name from the sim. So we go into this data ref tool, click Control A, Control C, and now if you come in here and you can just paste it here, right? So like, then you can say equals to 0. The value doesn't actually matter here, but please don't set it to something random. It might mess up the thing. Just set it to 0 or 1. Next is continued. This is flight model details that will be transferred from the master to the slave at all times. So for example, we want the fuel flow from the master to be synced to the slave, but the slave thing and yeah. So this would probably be done for fuel levels. This would be done for engine RPMs, anything to do with the flight model. So right now we have the fuel flow setup, and you'll see this thing, right? And that's an array index. So now I will explain this to you. So let's just copy this 1 second. And if we go into the sim now and we remove this, and then we'll just type in that, right? This fuel flow kg per second, this thing, and you can see there's this weird thing, right? And it and this basically means that it's an array. So it's a list of fuel flows for each engine. In this plane, we only have one engine, so you can only see a positive value for the first one, right? So now we want to sync this value, right? So now we will copy this name, right? And let me just demonstrate it to you. So if I just change my engine RPMs, you can see that changes as well. So now I think this is measured in tons per second. So actually, I'm not sure. Anyways, so we just copy this in, right? And let's go to our editor and we'll just say here, just paste this in. Now, what if we wanted to sync just this index, right? You can't just enter this directly in. By the way, if you do that, it will just break it. So you have to specify an index to sync. So right now we want to sync just the 0th index. Indexes start from 0. So we just want to sync the 0th index. right? So we set that to 0. Now, if we wanted to sync the first index as well, then we just paste this in and we change this to 1. So this would be the second index of this one over here, but we don't need to sync that right now, so let's delete this, right? Next, for the overrides, right? So this is probably pretty obvious, except for this one detail. So now if you see here, there's an override for the fuel flow, right? So let's say override, right, fuel flow. Let me just switch off this change filter. You can see now it shows something here. So now if we want to override the fuel flow in the slave mode, then we set this value to 8, okay? And if we wanted to override it in master mode, we want to set it to 1. And if we want to override it in both modes, then we set it to 9. Right? So we only want this to override when it's in slave mode, right? So now what it will do is it will set this value to 1 when in slave mode, right? Or whatever specified here. So let's just create a comment here. 1 master, 8 slave, and 9 both. Okay, so that's how that works. Okay, now lastly, let's say we want to sync a command. Okay? So here we have an example of the engage starters command. So let's just shut off that aircraft real quick. Let's shut off the engine, right? So now let's switch to commands and we'll say engage starters. Right, so you can see now this is the command that engages our starter, and if you want to do, then I'll just push this all the way in, and when I click press, you can see that moves and my engine starts up. Okay, so let's say we wanted to sync this, which we probably do, right? So now we just copy this in, right? Go here, paste in the name, equal to 0. Again, the value doesn't matter, but I recommend that you just leave it at 0 to prevent anything from breaking. So that's essentially how you sync the commands, right? So now when this is pressed down, it will be pressed down on the slave, and when this is released, it will be released on the slave. Let's just show this again because I find it quite fascinating. And yeah, that's basically how you make a basic configuration file. Now, of course, you won't just be syncing this much, you'll be syncing huge amounts of commands, overrides, not overrides, that aren't many in the first place, continued and triggers. So just to recap again, triggers is for bidirectional. Both master and slave can change these values, right? Next, we want to say this is continued, so this is one way sent from master to slave. And next is override. These are overrides. And then we have the commands. So this is commands to be synced. So commands are always two ways. So if a slave presses it, then it will be registered, and same for the master. So usually there aren't commands for the more vital stuff like changing joystick heading and whatnot. So it isn't a problem for these to be synced both ways. And yeah, so that's basically how that works. And lastly, we need to talk about the setup. So although these are default values, it is recommended to give the user already preset values for the master address. Set it to 127.0.1. Just copy this. Paste it 4 times. Now let's say slave address. Slave address. Then we have the master port, which will be set to 49,000. Slave port is equal to 49,001. Okay, so now if the user wants to change any of these values, then they can do that by themselves. And this is basically how you change who you connect to. I'm afraid it's not very user friendly, but on the bright side, The XShared cockpit is only loaded every time the file, the CFG file is only loaded every time you either toggle the master or the slave. So in other words, you can update this. So like I can change this to 49,002, and then if the master is off and I enable master, it will immediately load this new value inside here. So that's it for how to make your own basic configuration file. I hope you've learned something. And I do recommend you to go read the Sky for Crew Hangar version. Note that the only, while all of the Sky for Crew different headers are supported, I recommend that you only use these four. So triggers, continued, override, commands, and setup. I mean, five. Since the other ones that are mentioned over there refer to stuff that is independent on which one of the two, either the master or the slave, has control of the aircraft. And since XShared Cockpit doesn't have that system, everything that is in let's see, yeah, everything that is in the header that will send things from the one who has control to the one who doesn't, which I believe is send back, the header name send back, right? That is that just is transferred to under continued, which is sent from master to slave, since only the master can have control of the aircraft. Thank you for watching this slightly lengthy tutorial. I know it's been very basic, it doesn't completely explain how to do it, but I'm afraid this is the extent to which I can explain it, after which you're expected to do some of it yourself. So thank you for watching this video. I hope you've enjoyed. I'm not going to tell you to like or subscribe because I don't really post videos much. So yeah, that's it for this video.